but you cannot increase the value of the goodwill. But if you recognize that it is no longer worth that amount, you have to recognize that and reduce it. And biggest example of that, and you guys are too young, you may not even remember, what did we have before Facebook? MySpace, okay? Do you know who bought MySpace? Wall Street Journal bought MySpace. I think it was either 2006 or 2007, I'm not sure. And they paid over $500 million for it. Okay? You know, and do you know what MySpace would be worth now? Probably negative, right? But you know, if you looked at MySpace's, MySpace did not even have any revenues those days. Okay, people valued it based on hits. You can even they did not have a single amount of ads sold or anything like that. People, even Facebook originally did not have revenues. They said we'll figure out a way to monetize it. As long as users were there, they'll figure out something. That's kind of how people invested into it. It's kind of leap of faith. In Facebook's case, it paid off, obviously. Anyway, so I don't remember what they had in their books, but could not have been more than a few million here and there. So let's assume original goodwill was 400 million for the MySpace acquisition. Well, you know, after Facebook came in, pretty much destroyed everything else, MySpace essentially became worthless. So you test for impairment means, okay, this thing is worth nothing. So I'm going to recognize that 400 million that I recognized as goodwill is now worth nothing. So I'm going to take a loss of 400 million on that. So you no longer have goodwill on that acquisition anymore. That's how the accounting for goodwill works now. But for other assets, for example, you have a truck. With trucks, you can actually do it. Let's say a truck that's used for construction purposes, you think it has a useful life of maybe 100,000 miles, right? And you already did 80,000 miles, you can write off 80% of it as uh, essentially depreciation, but you're using the method a little bit differently. You know, for vehicles, you could do that sort of stuff. But either way, their book value is whatever you paid in the past less how much depreciation you charge for it. It has nothing to do with the current value of it. I mean, let's say you bought a corporate building in Midtown Manhattan in 1950s, okay, for a skyscraper. You probably paid only $1 billion for that. Probably not even that much. $1 billion was a lot of money in 1950s. And buildings charge you can probably charge them off over 30 years in terms of depreciation. And so on the books, that building is worth zero because I bought it more than 40 years ago. Whatever I paid for it, I written off everything. So the book value of the building is zero. That means as an asset, it's listed as zero. Do you think a skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan would be worth nothing right now? No. So we distinguish between book value of assets and market value of assets. Market value of current assets are typically very close to their book value, except for the inventory, because you keep inventory at cost, but you can sell it at may or may not be the same as market value. In any case, if market value is greater than the book value of the inventory, you book it as book value. Whichever one is lower, you book it at that. If market value is lower, you book it at market value. So even though because of your accounting methods, you know, those avocados have a cost of goods sold of $2, but you know you could only sell them for $1. then you're gonna write your inventory as $1. But if you could sell them at $3, you're gonna write it at cost, lesser of cost or market. Other than that, cash is cash, and accounts receivables are booked net of any doubtful allowances. That's all there is to it. But these tell stories. The current part is important for short-term lenders to the firm. I may be one of those firms that sold you stuff on credit. Okay? I'm a short-term creditor to you. I don't particularly care whether you have a building that's worth $1 billion. If you cannot convert that to cash in 90 days, it doesn't concern me, because all I care is whether or not you can pay me 90 days from now. Whether or not you can pay me 9 years from now is of no interest to me, because I owe other people money in short term, so that if you pay me, I can pay them. No firm, I shouldn't say no firm, but most firms don't ever go bankrupt because they lose money. They go bankrupt because they can't make their payments. For a lot of different reasons. Either they're not making enough money, or somebody who's supposed to pay them didn't pay them quickly enough, so they can't get out of it. Or they couldn't, roll their debts or anything like that. On the liability side, basically on the asset side, we list them in the decreasing order of liquidity. We start with most liquid, cash, accounts receivable, inventory, other current assets, then fixed assets. In fact, even the fixed assets are divided into two groups: tangible assets and intangible assets. Tangible assets are assets that have a physical existence. A computer is a tangible asset. A truck is a tangible asset. You can touch it. On the other hand, goodwill is not a tangible asset. It may be a very big number, but it doesn't have a physical existence. Things that you may have bought, something like copyrights. Okay? Because if you haven't bought it directly, even a copyright is not listed, because you haven't paid anything to get it. Or a patent, you haven't paid anything to get it. If that patent originated in your own firm, but if you bought another firm and it came with it, then there's a cost associated with it, then you can actually list it among your fixed assets. But again, they are intangible assets because they don't have a physical existence. Liability side is listed in increasing order of maturity of obligations. That means short-term liabilities. If only I could spell. We say typically less than a year. They are called current liabilities. Or short for CL. And the rest is called long-term debt. LTD. Some people call it non-current liabilities. That's fine, but in the lingo of this class, at least we're going to call it long-term debt. Of course, total liabilities is equal to current liabilities plus long-term debt, right? Among current liabilities, typically the one that has the least maturity is accounts payable. These are amounts that you owe to other companies. You bought stuff from them on credit, but you're gonna pay them in relatively short period of time. You may have short-term debt. You borrow for 3 months. For example, you issue a commercial paper, which is basically a very short-term corporate bond, and also known as current portion of long-term debt. A lot of corporate bonds, they have coupons, so you actually have to pay them. So that would be current portion of long-term debt. And of course, other current liabilities. That could be deferred taxes, for example. Taxes that have accrued, but you haven't paid them yet. But they're due within a year. So that's a current liability. And there may be wages that have accrued, but you haven't paid them yet. That's another example. Or customers paid for a product, but you haven't delivered it yet. That would be another example of a current liability. They pay it ahead of time. It takes you 2 months to deliver it because you have to build it and all sorts of stuff. That would be an example of current liability. And long-term debt is, as this says, long-term debt, stuff that you don't have to pay for a while. These could be bonds. These could be bank loans. Capital lease obligations, what have you. Now, we also are going to define a quantity called net working capital. Short NWC. This is basically the difference between current assets and current liabilities. In a sense, that's your net short-term assets. Okay? It's how much money do you have that is relatively liquid over and above what you need to pay out in a year. If I'm a short-term creditor, I'm going to look at that number. Because this guy owes a lot of money in the short term. Does he have enough liquid stuff that could cover those liabilities? If net working capital is negative, and it could be negative, and I may not be as willing to extend credit to that company.